Hello and welcome to the East-West Fabfour Library. I'm David Earle and I'll be your host as we explore this incredibly fanatical and faithful representation of the sound and style of the Beatles. Doug Rogers cites the Beatles as his inspiration for becoming a music producer and engineer. He decided that he was going to make the best, most accurate, and meticulously designed library of the Beatles' instruments and sounds after already making some really amazing libraries for East-West. His devotion to this project led him to the acquisition of well over $1 million in musical instruments and recording equipment. All of the instruments are played through era-specific amplifiers, recorded through period-accurate mixing desks, and were recorded onto the iconic J37 tube tape machine that is the same as what the Beatles used back in the day. There's never been a more faithful and methodical approach to creating a library so dedicated to the Beatles. Doug even hired Ken Scott to engineer on this library. Now, Ken's worked on A Hard Day's Night, Help, Rubber Soul, The Magical Mystery Tour, and the Beatles' self-titled album. The players who are playing the instruments are none other than Lawrence Juber and Denny Sewell of the Paul McCartney band Wings. So this library is an amazing snapshot of an incredible explosion of creativity in the music world. Let's dive into this library and just explore it. When I click on the browser, there are 5 main categories: bass, drums, guitars, keys, and miscellaneous. When you look inside the folder, you'll notice these fun folders that are called things like Bass Tripper, Come To Bass, and with a little help from my bass. Names like these actually are meaningful because they're telling you the sort of reference point for why these basses are in this library. Bass Tripper is going to be the classic Paul McCartney 1963 Hofner 500 bass, just like Come To Bass is a different version of the 1963 Hofner bass. When we go to With a Little Help from My Bass, then we're talking about the 1964 Rickenbacker 4001 S bass. And as you go through these different instruments, you can go to the manual and look up what all of these instruments are. They have their names for a reason. So if you go to Day in the Drums, it's probably Day in a Life. Help, I'm a snare. Maybe that's Help. And all of these things have meaning. And if you go to the manual that comes with it, you'll be able to really explore the history of these instruments and why they're there. When you get down to miscellaneous, you start to see things like percussion and screaming girls. Screaming girls. So check it out. This is an actual recording of girls screaming at a Beatles concert that was released on a BBC recording. So they actually licensed this from the BBC. There's a lot of that kind of love that went into this library. When you go into the keys and you check out the Mellotrons, it says strawberry flutes, right? The strawberry flutes, the actual sample of those flutes comes directly from the Mellotron Corporation, which made the keyboard that played the flutes on Strawberry Fields. So it's just amazing how much went into this library. And I highly recommend that you go through the manual and you check out all of these names and match them up with the actual instrument that was played and the techniques that were used to record it, because it's some deep history, and I think you're going to learn a lot. If I go into something like Bass Tripper, you'll see that I get an Elements patch, and I get one called Master. When you go to Elements, and I load up Elements, essentially we see the keyboard down below, and if I go into the player, you'll see that the articulations are loaded into the lower right-hand side. This allows you to select which articulations you want to mix in when you're using this bass. If we go back to the browser and choose Master, we get a series of key switches. The key switches are in blue, and the playable range is in white. So you want to look out for that when it comes to these instruments that have Master and Elements. The Elements are only going to load one articulation. If you want to play more than one articulation at a time, you'll either need to load those articulations in the player, or you'd probably want to use the Master. If we go to something like drums, these drums don't have an articulation and a master. They were recorded very specifically to get the sound that we want out of those drums, okay? And go to guitars. These you'll see elements and masters as well. Keys. Some of these have long and short articulations. And then our miscellaneous effects. Highly recommend going into the manual. Again, I'll say it again because it's super cool what they added in the manual, showing you how these things were recorded and where they come from. When we click on the player, what we get is a customized player for the Fabfour library. On the left-hand side, we have delay and ADT. ADT actually means automatic double tracking, and it was invented by George Martin, who worked with the Beatles. They would have say a guitar recording, and they wanted to double it, but without having to play the part again, they wanted to see if there was a technique that they could use to create a double of the guitar using nothing but the original performance of the guitar. So what would happen is they would record the guitar that was previously recorded on one tape deck to another tape deck, and you would get the two guitars playing against each other, and just the natural wow and flutter and peculiarities of the decks, they would keep them from sounding exactly the same. The little pitch drifts and things like that would allow it to sound doubled. So to create different effects in that doubling, you can change the delay, you can change the depth of the automatic double tracking, you can change the speed of the tape, and you can change the level. Over on the right-hand side, we have a basic amplitude envelope, and above that, we have reverb. When you look to the top of the screen, you can see your channel source. We have stereo, mono, mono from left, mono from right, and then swap left and right. And then we have a stereo spread, which is using more of a Haas effect, or a slight delaying between the two sides. Slightly different from what ADT does. Now, when it comes to the library and it comes to the sounds of the library, I'd like to play you some performances of these instruments. The best way to hear these sounds is within the context of the songs that inspired them. In this case, we have the opening line to Blackbird by the Beatles. And the sound that we're using is a 1966 Martin D28 acoustic guitar. Check it out. These sessions are a great example of the kind of detail that you can get out of these libraries. In this particular case, the track is broken down to its emphasis in squeak and strums and off strums. You can really get as detailed as you like with this library, and the sound is authentic. All right, let's go on to the next one. You probably recognize this lick. Of course, that's the iconic 1963 Hofner bass that Paul McCartney loved to use all the time. And then we've got the 1960 Ludwig downbeat kit that's been dampened down to within an inch of its life to create this kind of a tone. As you can hear, this is a really faithful representation of the sounds that were used within this song. All right, what's next? Here Comes the Guitar is a 1966 Gibson J200 acoustic that's being picked. Check this out. Very nice. So here's the final mix for the song I Want You, using nothing but Fabfour instruments. So as you can hear, these instruments are Really, yeah, of course, really good. The kit, again, is the downbeat kit, but there's a special kit called eardrums that has the small kit in a small room. So it sounds kind of neat when you have something like your cymbals here. And then, of course, the kick is coming from the In the End There Will Be Drums, which is another version of this downbeat kit that's been processed in a different way. Yeah, that's pretty much just a kick. We have our snare, which comes from the same kit as the kick. And then our toms. Really interesting. The bass, of course, is the Hofner bass, which we've heard already. Really nicely done. Here we have a nice little organ sound. Check this out. Well done. For the guitar, which is, of course, one of the main aspects of this song, it's actually using the Something rhythm guitar. So Something is a rhythm guitar is a 1951 Fender Telecaster electric guitar going through a Leslie speaker, which is pretty awesome. Check this out. Just a little accents there. Then we have the lead sound, and the lead sound is the Come On guitar from the sort of originally inspired by the Come Together solo. It's a 1957 Les Paul Gold Top electric guitar going through a 1963 Fender Bassman amp. So check this out. Using a lot of modulation and pitch bends and things like that, you can make it sound very realistic. So there you go. Let's check out another one. Let's check out Lady Madonna. So even though it's piano, you can hear that it's being really processed in some interesting ways. If I open up the play instrument, there's Madonna piano. And we've got some delay on it, some reverb. We're using the automatic double tracking, which of course is helping with that nice warbly tone. If I solo the instrument, I'm actually going to region solo so you can hear the different elements. Let's check this out. So as you hear, that's a Steinway B piano, but of course it's been processed in a really interesting way. And then down below on our bass, we once again have the Come to Bass Master, which is based off of the 1963 Hofner bass. Important to note that we have the key switches going on up here. So you can hear how important it is to incorporate the key switches into your playing if you want things to sound realistic. All right, what's next? I received this session from East West to show off Fabfour, and it's one of the ones I'm most impressed by. It's She's So Heavy, and it's the solo section, which to me would be incredibly hard to pull off, but check this out. So some of these instruments we've heard before. We've heard the eardrums, which are the Ludwig kit, and then the Come To bass, but I want guitar. This is really interesting because it's it's a doubled guitar sound that's built into one patch. So the I Want guitar is an Epiphone Casino going through a Fender Deluxe, and then we also have a Fender Strat going through a Fender Tan Showman, and it's doubled. So it gives you this kind of tone. If we look in the play engine, we can see that it's in stereo, and that means that we're hearing both channels. Pretty interesting. I just thought that was kind of amazing. Again, we have another B3 organ. Really nice. So check out the Pepper guitar. Now these are the rough tracks. That's the Gibson SG going through a 1966 Vox Defiant amp. We got another one going on here. Adding variation so you can blend them together. Really awesome stuff. Then we have this thing called Something Solo. So this is Something as a guitar solo. 1957 Les Paul Gold Top Electric going through a 1963 Fender Bassman. So we've heard this before, but check it out. That is just a real signature sound. Kind of amazing. Anyway, kind of dove deep into that one because I was so amazed by it. Let's check out another one. I would venture to say that anybody who's ever played a mellotron has played this lick. That is the Strawberry Fields Mellotron flute. And there are many libraries that have mellotrons. But what's unique about this library, this is the actual tapes from the mellotron from that recording, which is astounding. And you can play it. So you're playing the actual Strawberry Fields flutes, not some kind of reproduction, not like another mellotron that was, had the same kind of flute patch. It's the exact mellotron tapes, licensed for mellotron, which is amazing to me. All right, what's next? Ticket to Ride, early Beatles. Let's check it out. That is an amazing recreation. When we get into the instrument, what we're actually listening to, the Ticket to Guitar, is a Rickenbacker 360 12-string electric guitar that's being played through a 1965 Vox AC50 amp. And there's just nothing like that. I've never heard that in a library before. And when I first heard the Beatles, that was a really unique sound to me as well. As a producer, I listened to it and went, what the heck is that? Because it's a 12-string guitar, but it's electric and had this really bright sound, and the amp that was paired with it was just perfect. Amazing stuff. So after a bit of processing and mixing, you can really dial it. Great stuff. Now, we've listened to the Your Blues drum kit before, but not in the context of the actual song. Check out the drum kit. I'm just going to play the drum kit by itself as a stem. The drums in this library have astounding character. I mean, they just blow me away. The snares are just incredible. I just feel like I'm in the room with them, and they're processed in this, just perfectly processed to sound like the Beatles. All right, so here's the song. So really great drums. And when I go into the kit, so it's using the Your drums, and each one of these is an element of the kit that they process differently. And here are the combined drums. And then when we get down here, we start getting into with a little help from my bass. So what's with a little help from my bass? It's a 1964 Rickenbacker 4001S bass. And of course, the Rickenbacker, that bitey rock tone that I personally just love. We've got Everybody's Got Guitar. And the Everybody's Got Guitar is a 1956 Epiphone Casino electric guitar going through a 1966 Vox Defiant amp. Coming down to Get Back My Guitar. The Get Back My Guitar is a 1956 Epiphone Casino running through a 1967 Fender Showman amp. As you can see, these instruments are paired with beautiful amplifiers, beautiful microphones. The instruments themselves sometimes are the original instruments that were being played during those sessions, which is astounding. So all of these instruments are boutique, vintage, and really, really special. This was a true labor of love by the team at East West. I'd like to show you a little bit about the mixer. So over here in Fabfour, if I open up the mixer, you'll see that under the effects section, I have the SSL channel strip, I have a convolution reverb, and I have a compressor. So you can get in there and you can really mix the sound as though you're mixing through an SSL console, which is pretty killer. And you get a bus compressor for every channel of play that you have. So you have your EQ, you have your dynamics, you have your transient shaping on the right-hand side where you can give it a little bit more attack, a little bit less sustain. And then over here in our EQ section, you can either use the G series EQ, or if you click this in, you get the E series EQ, which is a little bit more for rock. The cues of the EQ are slightly different. So that's Fabfour in a nutshell. This is an amazing library, and I hope that you truly plumb its depths and get into all of the sounds and use them in any context possible, from hip-hop to film scoring, because they're fantastic sounding and sound wonderful in a mix. So next, I'd like to play you a demo of what Fabfour is capable of. And then I will see you in our next cartoon. Take care. Ciao.